Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this flaskup.com Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Sha of Pride on normal mode in the new Siege of Orgrimmar raid. Now in order to complete this fight you're going to want to take 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers depending on how good your healers are, and then a remaining mixture of both melee and ranged DPS. Now at the start of this fight you'll probably notice that you've gained a corruption bar on your screen. And the idea of this fight is to keep your corruption level as low as possible, as when your corruption level increases, you'll have different abilities cast on you at a certain point during this fight. It's also worth noting that the Sha of Pride has an energy bar, and when his energy bar reaches 100, he will begin to cast an ability called Swelling Pride, which will release a wave of dark energy at the raid, and it will give players 5 Pride. We'll take a further look at Pride and also what abilities will be cast on you later on in the guide, as we're going to first off start by talking about the Sha of Pride himself. Now, previously you fought Nurashen, or Nurashen's Amalgam of Corruption, and he is now present in this fight again, and throughout the fight he will be casting an ability on you called Gift of the Titans. Now this will cause him to periodically grant players immunity to Pride for 20 seconds, and if all players with Gift of Titans stand within 8 yards of each other, they will gain Power of the Titans. Now, Power of the Titans will cause you to increase your healing and your damage dealt by 15%, and it will also increase your haste by 15% as well. This is very beneficial to your raid, so at all times you want to make sure that you are stacked up like we are in the video. We kind of stacked up in melee range because we just found it easier to be as one on top of the boss. On 10 man, we found that 3 people will get Gift of the Titans at any one time. Now this Gift of the Titans buff is very beneficial to your raid for one main reason, and this is for an ability called Mark of Arrogance, as this will cause the Sha of Pride to mark 2 players, inflicting a moderate amount of shadow damage to them every second for the remainder of the encounter. And if any healer is to dispel this ability off of a player that's currently got it, then they will gain 5 Pride. Now, obviously, if you put 2 and 2 together here, if you dispel a player while you have Gift of the Titans, you won't gain any Pride. So you want to leave the dispelling to the healer that has the Gift of the Titans buff. His next ability is called Self-Reflection, and this causes 5 players to reflect upon themselves, so to speak. And what this will do is cause a little mob to spawn at 5 random raid players' feet, and this will cause a reflection of Pride to spawn at their locations. Now, when the reflections spawn, they actually explode out of the ground at a player's location and will inflict quite a high amount of shadow damage to all players within 2 yards. And additionally, any player that's damaged by this explosion will gain 5 Pride. So what you need to make sure you're doing is when you see the ads starting to spawn, you move to the side, let them spawn, and then what you want to do is use stuns and snares in order to keep them in place and kill them off as soon as possible. You don't want your tanks to pick up these mobs, because if they do and get hit by them, then they will gain high amounts of Pride, as we found out on one of our tries. I think one of the tanks ended up reaching 80 Pride within the first minute of the fight, just because he tried tanking these mobs, so don't do that. And speaking of tanks, there's also an ability that they're going to have to manage during this fight, and that is called Wounded Pride. Now this is a debuff that will be placed on tanks, and whenever a player gets the Wounded Pride debuff, you will need to tank switch. If you do not switch, it will cause the tanks to take unnecessary stacks of Pride, because if they have the debuff and get hit by the Sha of Pride, they will be given 5 Pride every time. It's kind of simple really. It's also worth noting that at all times during this fight, you must have at least a few players in melee range, because if not he will cast Reaching Attack, which will cause the Sha of Pride to strike at a distant target, inflicting 50% of weapon damage as shadow, and also increasing shadow damage taken by 25% for 8 seconds. This shouldn't be an issue. There's no real reason why you should need to move out of melee range or have everyone move out of melee range at any point during this fight. Now periodically throughout the fight, the Sha of Pride will spawn big ads to the side of the room, and these ads are called Manifestations of Pride, and these will be summoned in order to attack players. Now they have 2 main abilities. The first one is called Mocking Blast, and this will cause the manifestation to blast random players, inflicting a moderate amount of shadow damage and giving them 5 Pride when they get hit. This ability is interruptible and should be interrupted when possible, as you want to keep the Pride low on the players, keep that in mind. He will also cast an ability called Last Word, and this will be cast when the manifestation dies, and it will cause him to give 5 pride to the 2 closest players when he does die. Again, this is where your Gift of the Titans buff can come into play. If you get 2 of the 3 people that do get the buff to move next to the manifestation of pride when it does die, they won't actually gain any stacks of pride because they're immune to it. It's quite a nice little way of, I'd say, cheesing your way through this encounter, but I think it's as intended, so it's not really cheesing, it's logically completing the fight. Now, earlier on in the video I mentioned this pride ability and also a swelling pride ability. Now, pride can be given to players through different means of abilities, such as getting hit by ads or standing in bad stuff, and the idea is to keep your pride as low as possible, and this is because every time the Sha of Pride reaches 100 energy, he'll cast an ability called Swelling Pride. Now, this will give everyone in the raid 5 pride, and it will also trigger a secondary effect on any player that's got 25 or more pride. Now, if you have between 25 and 49 pride, you will get an ability called Bursting Pride cast on you, and what this does is create a mass Sha corruption at your location, and after 3 seconds the corruption explodes, deals a high amount of damage, and also gives 5 pride to any player that does get hit by it. So what you want to do is, when the Sha of Pride is at around 96 out of 100 energy, you want to move out of the raid and wait for him to cast Swelling Pride, and then once Bursting Pride has been put on the ground, you want to move away from it and go and stack back up with your raid. It's as simple as that, really. If you've got between 50 and 74 pride, then an ability called Projection will be cast on you, and what this will do is spawn a projection 15 yards away from that player's current location, and what you need to do is get to that projection within 8 seconds, otherwise it will explode and inflict a high amount of shadow damage to every player in the raid. Now, you need to be standing directly on top of it, otherwise it will explode, and again, anyone that gets hit by the explosion will gain 5 pride. It's fairly simple. As soon as the Sha of Pride casts Swelling Pride, you just need to be on the lookout for where your projection is created. If you've got 75 to 99 pride, then the ability Aura of Pride will be cast on you, and this will afflict you with an Aura of Pride for 25 seconds, and this causes you to inflict a high amount of shadow damage to any allies that are within 5 yards every second. Again, any player that gets hit by the Aura of Pride damage will gain 5 pride. What you need to do is, when the boss is at around 96-97 energy, is move out of the raid to a safe location where you're not going to hit any players with the Aura of Pride debuff. Stand there for 25 seconds, and then you want to move back in and stack up with your raid and continue with the fight as normal. Finally, if you do reach 100 pride, which no one in the raid should, you will become Overcome, and this causes you to increase your damage and healing done by 50%. However, the next time the Sha of Pride casts Swelling Pride, you will become permanently mind controlled and have your health increased by 100%. So the Sha of Pride will use you against your raid and start killing your raid with you. This isn't what you want to happen. Keep your pride low. There's no reason for it to get too high. Now, something else that you've probably noticed in the video is that to the side of the room we've got a yellow and a purple marker, and just for reference, the blue marker is where we've been stacking up. Now, this is due to an ability called Corruptum Prisons, and throughout the fight, random players this is, will be trapped in corrupted prisons, and what you need to do is free them from it. Now, in order to do this, you can see that in these corrupted prisons there are kind of little blue aura lights around them, and what you need to do is get players to stand on the lights that turn orange and wait there until the player has been freed from the Titan prison. For every second a player is within the Titan prison, they will gain pride and also take damage. What you should also keep in mind is that when players are about to become trapped in a Titan prison, the prison will actually explode and deal a small amount of damage to any player that's within a certain radius, and that player will also gain 5 pride. So this kind of stops you preemptively moving too close to the prisons in order to free players. What we did is split the raid into 2 groups. However, if you're in 25 man, you probably want to split it into 4 groups, as 2 prisons are active in 10 man and all 4 are active in 25 man. As I was saying, you split the raid into 2 groups or 4 groups, and then those players are responsible for going to the different corners or the different prisons and making sure that players are freed before they gain too much pride or take too much damage. Now when the Sha of Pride reaches 30% remaining health, he will become unleashed, and this is kind of his little enrage ability that you need to burn him through. This is the part of the fight where we want you to use all of your damage and healing cooldowns and, you know, your bloodlust, time warped heroism in order to burn the boss as fast as possible. Now at this point, unfortunately, RIP Norishen, he does actually die, and he leaves in a hero's way, I guess it is, as he will reset everyone's pride to 0, which is quite nice of him really, isn't it? So this is very beneficial if people do have high amounts of pride. However, at this point during the raid, when he does become unleashed, the Sha of Pride will begin inflicting high amounts of shadow damage every 10 seconds that your raid will have to heal through. As well as this, he will also cast all of his normal abilities, so you need to kind of end this phase fast. So that's going to do it for this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide. The fight itself is actually, I think we enjoyed it as a guild. It was quite fun, something a little bit different, and there is quite a bit for you to get your head around, but you know, once you do that, any fight's easy really, isn't it? So as always, thank you for watching, and if you would like to see a written version of this guide, then you can head on over to flaskup.com or follow the link in the video description below. Alternatively, if you'd like to see any of our other video guides, you can click on the annotations on screen now. Thank you for watching, and if you did enjoy this guide, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.